clean your nasty legs. So I'm gonna be running through a lower leg service on my RockShox Lyrik Ultimate. This is virtually the same service that you do for any Pike, Lyrik, Yari, or Revelation. Just be sure to check the SRAM service archive for your specific model and year so that you know exactly which type of oil and the oil volumes that you're supposed to use. Within this service, I'm going to take it a step up. We're going to add an additional 5 to 10 minutes to the typical lower leg service by taking out the air spring, cleaning it, lubing it. That really takes a typical lower leg service and makes it that much more effective. I'm actually going to be upgrading to the new 2021 Debonair air spring. This new air spring is supposed to be an upgrade to the older Debonair air spring, and that it's supposed to eliminate the tendency for these newer forks to stay sucked down in their travel because the fork has some difficulty regulating air between the negative and positive air chamber. So check out my video on the 2021 Debonair air spring upgrade. This is where you want to be for how to do that install. This is also the same piece. Basically, the air spring is what you change if you want to change the travel of your fork. So if you're wanting to go from, say, a 150 to a 160 millimeter travel fork, this is the piece that you would change. That would be a prime opportunity for you to be able to pick up the new Debonair air spring upgrade. It's worth noting that if you don't want to change travel, you can actually do the upgrade just by picking up the new seal head and foot nut for $25, or the whole air spring is $42. Again, check out my video on that. Within this service as well, I'm going to show you how to do the hack of actually taking out this top out bumper that you see here. That effectively increases the volume of the negative air chamber, which can help make your ride more supple on the top end, but it also gives you better bottom out resistance. I've already done that on the old Debonair air spring on my Lyrik Ultimate and could really tell that it did make those changes. I feel like it's more supple on the top end, but I'm not bottoming out nearly as easily. And so I feel like that's a quick and simple hack that you can do right in line with this air spring service. RockShox recommends that you do the lower leg service every 50 hours. And so at least every other lower leg service, I recommend taking out your air spring and lubing it up as well. Let's do this thing. So here's what you're gonna need. If you're gonna do the top out bumper hack, you're gonna need a 12 mil wrench and an 8 mil Allen. Otherwise, you're gonna need a 5 mil and a 2.5 mil Allen. You're gonna need the cassette lock ring tool or whatever it takes to remove your model's air spring top cap. You need a pick or a small Allen key that has an L shape on it. SRAM butter or dynamic seal grease. Only the newest forks use the dynamic seal grease. All of them can use SRAM butter. You're going to need a syringe, preferably one that measures in milliliters. You're going to need a cup. You don't have to get new foam rings. You can actually clean the ones that you have, but the cup helps you to soak the foam rings and also gives you something to put your oil into to draw it from the syringe. If you want to do the air spring service, you are going to need some lock ring pliers. You need a rubber mallet. You want to have some eye protection. You need some isopropyl alcohol and some shop towels. I like to actually lay several of these already out because you're just going to be bumping into a lot of oil and grease during the service. And then I like to have a PVC pipe so that I can actually run some of these towels through the tubes to clean them out. And then you need something to dump the oil in and recycle it appropriately. So step number one, you want to remove your air spring top cap. Just grab your 2.5 mil Allen and slowly depress the air valve to let out the air of your fork. It's arguably the most important step. Take your lock ring removal tool. It's an old cassette tool. Those are very finely threaded threads, and so it takes several turns. I think on the older forks, it's a 24 mil socket. If you want to make any changes to your volume spacers or bottomless tokens, as RockShox calls it, this is exactly where you do it. At this point, we need to remove the rebound knob adjuster and then the two nuts that are on the lower legs. Quick side note of why I did a review of the PRS 25 part tool stand. I wanted a robust stand, and I really had this point of maintenance in mind where you can really tilt the bike back so that you can keep the fork on the bike to do this part of the maintenance. It's been a really robust stand, and it's holding the bike just completely fine in this position. Quick little commercial for that bike stand review video. Take your 2.5 mil Allen key, turn the set screw just a few turns counterclockwise, and it should slide right off. You're gonna take your 5 mil Allen key and you're gonna turn both of these nuts counterclockwise, just a few turns, so that you basically take them out about a ½ centimeter. And you want to go ahead and have your oil pan on standby. You're basically going to have to separate the uppers from the lowers. That's why you want to leave just enough of the bolt in there so that you don't strip the threads out, because we're gonna have to tap these out. Now you can tap directly on these if you have a rubber mallet. I've never had an issue with doing that. Another way to do it that's a little more in line with the way RockShox recommends is to take and tap your Allen key. I'm just gonna tap directly on it. I feel like I have a little better control of the feel. It takes a relatively firm tap, and there's a distinct give to it when it actually releases. And just for the sake of showing you, I'll show you it with the Allen. This does prevent your hammer from actually hitting the bottom of the fork, which is probably a better way. You want to go ahead and have your bucket handy and go ahead and bring out the bolts the whole way. You may have to put these back in depending on whether or not the lowers are fully released from the uppers. And then as I go to rotate the bike down, you may get some oil to start coming out. And you should be able to just take and pull these off. There may be a little bit of resistance at the end. If it's still stuck, you're gonna know it, but there you can see the oil release. You may have to cycle it a few times, but I can feel that one of the sides is still stuck. You can just put the screw back in the damper side, or whichever side has not released its oil yet or doesn't seem to be letting go. And thread enough of the threads back in so that you're not going to damage the threads when you hit this. You want at least 2 or 3 threads in there. And there you can see that got it. And the lowers at this point should go ahead and slide off. Here we'll go ahead and take our pick. Carefully slide under the foam ring. Pull that out. Don't discard that if you don't have any replacement foam rings. Place it on a clean shop towel. Do the same with the other side. If you don't have any replacement foam rings, take and just sort of douse these with some alcohol. You'll be surprised at how well these come out clean just from doing this. You can tell they're quite a bit wider. So you can reuse those foam rings, but I've reused these through several services. So I've actually prepped some new foam rings soaking. Now you want to take some alcohol and a shop rag and just thoroughly clean the inside of those wiper seals. These should be relatively clean, but it's not a bad idea to go ahead and clean out the inside of your lower legs. If you have some spray alcohol or suspension cleaner, you can do that. I've actually attached a very clean shop rag to a PVC pipe here. And I'm just gonna get quite a bit of alcohol on the actual rag. And I'm gonna run that carefully. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a twist as you're turning it in, just as a way to sort of clean out the lower leg. Then if you wanna be extremely thorough, it wouldn't be wrong to douse just a little bit of alcohol into the lower leg. I would then let the lower legs just kind of drain and let the alcohol dry for a few minutes before you install your foam rings and grease the seals. You want to grab your foam rings and put them back in. It seems like some people can make this look so easy. With just a little bit of patience and persistence, you'll get them to line back up just like they did before. And I always find it helpful to take the pick and just sort of slide it under it, and it'll tend to seat itself. It should sit in there very flush. And we'll put the other side in. Here I like to take a completely clean shop towel. You want to just clean off the oil that was put onto the wiper seal from putting your foam rings in. This is going to let the grease stick better to the inside of the wiper seal. You then want to take a dollop of the grease that you're using, run that on the inside of the wiper seal, put a thin coating. At this point, the lowers are cleaned and you're ready to put them back on if you're only doing a lower leg service, or if you're going to do the air spring service, we'll move on to that step. So here, now looking down at the bottom of the air spring side, you can see there's a circlip that has to come off prior to removal of the air spring. I really advise using eye protection before you do this. And that's why I advise using 2 hands in case you lose the grip. You're still there just to be able to slide that right off. So once you get the circlip out, you're actually ready to remove the air spring. And you're just going to basically take a piece of shop towel for extra grip and grab a hold of the air spring shaft at the foot nut. And you're going to feel a lot of resistance, so you do not want to stand downwind of it, but rather to the side, just like I am. Just take and give it a nice firm pull. There's your old Debonair air spring. Because the air spring piston actually slides up and down on the inside of the upper tube, we want to clean that out. So I just like to take a piece of shop towel and do similar to what we did on the lower leg, but because we took out the air spring top cap, you can actually twist as you push, and the shop towel will push out the other side. Take any debris with it or excess oil. Feel free to repeat that a few times. Mine looks pretty good after the first time. And you should be able to see all the way through. And there you might be able to see the little dimple kind of on the inside there. That's the dimple that regulates air between the positive and negative air spring. And that is what the seal head position changes in relation to when you go with the upgraded Debonair air spring. So here you can see the old Debonair air spring and then the new one, or the upgrade, the 2021. The new one is actually longer, and these are both 150 millimeter air springs. The foot nut is slightly longer on the new one, as is the seal head here. And so that is supposed to effectively raise up the air spring so that the fork basically sits higher in its travel. And it's supposed to change where the actual seal head here sits in relationship to that little dimple on the inside of the tube that regulates air from the negative to the positive chamber. And you can see here on my older Debonair air spring, I've actually removed this top out bumper here, which, as I talk about, will actually make the negative air chamber bigger. So regardless of whether you're doing it on the new one or the old one, if you want to take out the top out bumper, just hook on your 12 mil wrench onto the foot nut, and then there is a place for an 8 mil Allen key at the top, and you'll just take and oppose those, turn counterclockwise, and that will allow you to take the foot nut off. Again, it's the same exact on the new or the old air spring. And then you can slide off the seal head, and then you can take off the top out bumper. While you're here, you want to go ahead and lube up the actual shaft of the air spring, as well as try to get some on the inside of the actual seal head. I'll usually do that on and off just to try to really get some on the inside of the seal head. You can also take your Allen key, just be very careful and kind of put some of the grease on the actual inside of the seal head there. You should actually remove the grease from the bottom of the air spring. Put just a very small amount of thread locker on the threads. And just tighten that back up. And then you want to grease up all the seals of the seal head and the air spring piston. Have a seal there and a seal here. You do want to get a small amount of grease, according to RockShox, back into the upper tube. You can do that by actually just running in the air piston all the way up into its travel several times. You got the seal head and air piston lubed up, and we're just going to basically put it back in. The air piston started, and the seal head will soon follow. Take your thumbs, and it's going to have a distinct sort of give. You can kind of take and push in on the air shaft. It should go in a few millimeters past the bottom of the slider. Do not, I repeat, do not forget your circlip. Get the circlip almost in place at the bottom of the slider, and then grab with the circlip pliers, and you're kind of pushing in as you're squeezing. And you can damage test that just by pulling out. There should be no give. If it pops back out, you didn't get your snap ring in place. But it looks nice and uniform all the way around, so it should be good and snug. Your air spring is now back in place. So for this next part, I actually find it much easier just to turn the bike upside down off from the stand. You want to take the lowers and replace them. You just simply do that by sliding them back on. Sometimes getting them lined up exactly can be difficult. Just try to get down and eyeball so that the wiper sill slides over the slides exactly. And there you go. Just be sure that you don't do it backwards. The crown goes to the front on these forks. Now it's at this point that you want to refill the lower legs with suspension oil. My Lyrik Ultimate 150 and Pike Ultimate 140 both require 10 millimeters of the 0W30 in the lowers. And if you see it kind of spill back out like that, it can be kind of airlocked. And so what you want to do is just try to pull the lowers back out, and you can kind of hear it release, and then you should be good to go. And the damper side as well. You then want to put the bolts back in to the bottom. Just be sure that you put the rebound on the rebound side, and you've always got your little rebound symbol there. Your rebound adjuster knob and your 2.5 Allen key, and snug that back up. A little more alcohol just to clean off the excess oil, just so that you're not attracting dirt. Make sure that your rebound adjuster spins freely. If you have one of the newer forks like the Lyrik or Pike Ultimate that call for dynamic seal grease, if you use the dynamic seal grease, RockShox calls for these forks 3 mils of the 0W30 suspension oil actually on the top of the air spring, like so. You then want to grab your air spring top cap, put a small amount of grease on the threads. Always by hand, start the air spring top cap going back in. Again, those are very fine threads. You do not want to cross thread that or it will completely ruin your uppers. Once you're sure that it's threaded in appropriately, you can then grab your cassette lock ring tool, take it as far as you can by hand, and be sure that you beat your carbon frame to death with your socket wrench while you're doing this. It helps. And then as you near the end of the threads, it'll come to a distinct block. I just typically take it another 1/8 to 1/4 turn past that. Definitely don't want to over tighten it. And then as always, alcohol back to anywhere that can have grease or oil on it. So there you have it, lower leg service, air spring service, or air spring change if you're looking to upgrade to the new 2021 Debonair air spring or change the travel of your fork. If you're mechanically inclined at all, you can do this service. You will not be disappointed in how much life this brings back into a fork that needs service. Check out my review video of the 2021 Debonair air spring. Please subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate you doing that. And as always, thanks for watching.